Well, welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Owen James, the channel that brings you your team every day, guys. Obviously, please smash that sub. Well, look, we are, less than a month away now from the start of the season. The season's fast approaching. Rangers are in competitive action on the 13th on Saturday against Ajax. Obviously, back to Rangers football after these Euros. Obviously, congratulations to Spain tonight, who made it to the Euro finals. Obviously, Holland versus England in tonight's game. As a Rangers fan, as someone who's had as a club who's had a number of Dutch players, Moles, Riksen, for example, the De Boer brothers, to name but Arten Newman, to name but a few, lots more you can name, Konterman, Van Bronk. We could go on forever, couldn't we? I've got to say, look, as much as I was perhaps boring, I will be back in the Dutch tonight. I do hope that Holland make it to the final. They've been the better football team in this tournament. England have been genuinely dreadful and don't deserve to be in the final. But let's get to the real news. Let's get to the really important stuff. Let's get to some Rangers talk. Right, look, it's obviously the preseason camp is taking place in Holland, and players travelled that I guess we all hoped at this stage would not be with the club anymore. Your Scott Wrights, your James Taverniers, your Connor Goldson's. Now the Saudi window apparently doesn't open to the 17th. I've also read the 14th, but let's just say the Saudi window doesn't open to mid to late July. So look, any movement out there is not going to happen as of yet. The team is pretty much, what is out there now is what we've got. You're going to see a return to competitive football on Saturday, and I strongly suggest you're going to see a number of players playing that perhaps you're not going to want to see next season in this Rangers team. I thought it would be useful to kind of reflect on where we're at as a team, reflect on what we've done so far, reflect on what's gone out, reflect on what needs to still go out, look at what would probably be the starting 11 if the season began today or, for the game on Saturday. And talk about it in terms of, what do we need to do? Now, before anybody gets on here and says, calm down, big lad, calm down. The season hasn't even started. The window's only just open. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Rangers should have shipped out 6 to 7 players by now, that they should have signed 12 players. I'm not saying any of that. What I am saying is that this is where we are. This is what we've done. This is what the team would look like. And this is what we still need to do. Okay, so I'm not saying I want it done this instant. I'm not saying I want it done yesterday. I'm not saying I want it done in the next week. What I am saying is we are here. We need to get to there. And this is how we're going to achieve it. That's what I'm going to try and talk about in this video. Okay, so please obviously don't come on and tell me to calm down, that the season's window's just only opened, how ridiculous that you want to bring in all these players, etc., etc. What I'm saying is we're here. We need to get to here. This is how we're going to do it. Okay, so let's look at it. Now, Nils Koppen, obviously, who is the recruitment director for Rangers, has been a very busy man so far. He has cast his net far and wide. We've been linked with a whole plethora of different players from all across the world, from Swedish, Danish leagues to the Moroccan league, to Eastern European leagues, to the South American leagues, to the North American leagues, all over. This man has traveled, even attending transfer summits in Cancun, Mexico. Why these summits are never in Blackpool, Scarborough, Saltcoats, and I don't know, Aberdeen. I don't know, but there you go. I guess Cancun's a bit nicer than those places. Anyway, so look, that's where he's been. That's where he's about. Now, in the recently released fan advisory board minutes that were released, Koppen had obviously spoken to them. He'd given his side of what was going on. He talked about, the redevelopment of the team, the need to redevelop the squad, the team need to rebuild the squad, not just the team. And I think that's one of the key things we're kind of losing sight of a little bit. We do have to rebuild not only a team, but a squad. It's not as if we have, a core of what I would call outstanding players. And then all we need to do is to slightly refresh this a little bit. And it's just the first team we need to refresh with those first teamers who replace dropping down to make the squad, and etc., etc. This is a squad-wide rehabilitation, a squad-wide revolution that needs to take place in a relatively short period of time. In effect, we need to do 2 windows business in one if we want to have at least a 3-quarter rebuild. I think realistically it's going to take at least a couple of windows, a couple of 3 windows to get all the business done for Philippe Clement and Nils Koppen to fully rebuild the team. Now, he talked about the fact that the idea was to look at the best young talents in the top leagues, to develop players that could be sold on for huge profits in the future to really get this trading model going. And I think that's that was the kind of dream, the kind of motor, the mission, the kind of operation that told Nils Koppen was given when he was appointed. The whole reason for his appointment was behind getting this trading model up and running. Now, he's already talked about Mohamed Diamande, who was purchased for around £4.5 million. It's about €5 million. But a player that is, going to go on to play in Europe's top leagues, the EPL, the La Liga, Serie A, Bundesliga, for a substantial amount of cash. Similar sort of thing has kind of been the same with, the other signings we've made so far, Hamza Igman, and Ciala, Cortez, Connor Barron to some extent. Those players again fit into this trading model, and that's very much the vision that Koppen continues to sell when he talks about the players he's looking to attract and bring to the club. He talked also about the fact that he wasn't ever going to take his eye off the Scottish market, that he felt it was important, as always, to keep your eye on the young Scottish players, on talent in the Scottish league, in the Scottish game, and bring those players in, as he's done so far with the signings of Connor Barron and Liam Kelly. Whilst that Liam Kelly is perhaps not one who fits the transfer model, Connor Barron certainly is. Liam Kelly is a kind of high profile kind of backup, isn't he? That's what he is, after being a starter for so long at Motherwell. In terms of the key points that Koppen spoke about, he spoke about the fact to prioritise high technical quality and athleticism. Very much getting those players who have good skill on the ball, can use the ball well, but also are very physically fit, physically able, big guys, fit guys. Something certainly we've seen with the types of player we've bought so far. He said the players need to be robust, reliable, and focused. So again, getting away from these players that are injury prone, getting away from these players that are going to collapse and give up, these players who's mentally weak, there is mental weakness too, certainly like we've seen, over the past seasons, where once we've got into winning positions or faced Celtic, we've kind of mentally collapsed, haven't we? The players, the play. I'm not going to name the players because I'm fed up with the abuse I get over talking about these players. But the players that would very much fit. Determined key markets where we can be successful, more active at untapped markets where they're still competitive. So very much looking at these leagues that haven't yet got players who are been bought and sold for vastly inflated prices. I mean, you've only got to look, yes, previously Rangers have shopped in the EFL Championship, but you've only got to look at the EFL Championship to see, the transfer fees that have been paid there for their players to bring them out of the EFL Championship. The player that I've talked about previously, Bristol City's, I think it's Alex Scott, who went from Bristol City to Bournemouth last year, 21 million. Jack Clark of Sunderland, valued at 25 million. Archie Gray recently transferred to Tottenham, 40 million. Crescencio Somerville of Leeds, linked with a move to Chelsea and Liverpool for £45 million. The fees that have been discussed down there for some of the players coming out of the Championship are utterly ludicrous amounts of money, certainly amounts of money that we could not afford. So yeah, and looking at those markets like the Moroccan market, the Swedish market, the Uruguayan market, the Chilean market, the Hungarian, and so on and so forth, markets that have not yet kind of given way to these vastly overinflated prices. He wants to keep an eye for Scottish market and Scottish talents, retain the best academy talents. Now, this for me is a real important one. We do need to bring through academy players. Cole McKinnon, Ross McCausland, who've already, Ross McCausland to a greater extent, Cole McKinnon to a lesser extent, Robbie Fraser to a lesser extent. But, there's a need as the seasons progress to keep bringing through players from that academy. Players that it's cost us pretty much nothing other than development fees to bring in and to sign. These players like Bailey Rice, like Paul Ncio, Josh Gentles, Archie Stevens, Leighton Grant, Mason Munn, and so on and so forth. He talked also about the fact to use our platform more to give opportunities to young players and develop them. So, the fact that he feels that young players do need to get more of a run in the team, more of a role in the team, and be used more, just like McCausland has, and to obviously a lesser extent how Cole McKinnon has. So bringing in and using the likes of Rice and Lovelace, etc., etc. Buy at the right price and sell at the right moment. So again, not letting contracts wear down, not letting us have a situation where players are walking for nothing again. Which is very much, I think, a thing that we need to do. We also talked about the fact that we're going to recruit players with the ability to make the next steps. So not signing players that have already reached a peak or have kind of passed their best, players that have still got room for development, room for improvement, players that we can make better and sell on for big prices. And the problem, I think, in the past windows is we've signed these 28, 29, 30-year-olds who've just got no development left to make, nowhere else to go other than down, and then we keep them for 2-3 seasons, hang on to them for too long. What we're left with, a player that's worth nothing that eventually walks out and we get nothing back for, which has happened on a number of occasions. What else? He talked about the fact that he wants stronger contract management. So again, looking at not running down deals. He wants as well players who are strong, robust, and can cope with the high amount of games that Scottish and British teams play. And that for me is absolutely vital. I think it's quite clear from what Nils Koppen has said that he's really got a handle on what we need, what types of player we need, and how this club moves forward. Now, that's where we're at in terms of what Nils Koppen believes. And, listening to what he says or reading what he says from this fan advisory board, my personal opinion is he is taking this team forward in the right direction. And this is the way forward, having a recruitment director who is there. So it doesn't matter who the manager is. This guy is there. He's the constant. He's going to bring these players in. Yes, the manager will have an input. I think any system where the manager doesn't have an input is absolutely ridiculous. You look at Sunderland, for example, south of the border, where their sporting director, Christian Speakman, signs all their players and their manager has no say. And they've lost, what is it? I see 3-4 managers in the last 12 months. Absolutely ridiculous. So look, I think the right way forward is to have a manager who has a say, and I think Philippe Clement is obviously having a big say in consultation with Koppen. But Koppen quite clearly has a vision, has ideas, and knows from what he's saying the best way forward. Young players, players with skill, players with fitness, players who are strong mentally and physically, players who are not susceptible to injury, players who will be worth a fortune in the future, players who will develop, players who are not past their best. And this is the mark. This is kind of going away from where we've been for the last 2, 3, 4 windows. We've signed players, particularly like Michael Beale last summer, players who are past their best, 28, 29, 30-year-olds who've got nowhere else to go other than down. So let's have a look at where we're at this moment in time in terms of the window. So these are the players who have gone from the club so far. John Lundstrom obviously left for nothing. Borna Barisic left for nothing at the end of his contract. Kieran Wright has gone out on loan to Airdrie. Ryan Jack left for nothing. Kamar Roof left for nothing. John McLaughlin left for nothing. And Fabio Silva came to the end of his loan period and was returned to his parent club, Wolves. So as it stands at present, we have not managed to generate any money from player sales. Nobody has gone out the door. Nobody has brought in funds. And that is a fundamental issue and a fundamental problem of this club, as it seems to me as if the board don't have a substantial amount of cash to invest in player purchasing. Yes, we have spent a little bit of money, just under 10 million. A lot of that will have come from the wages that we've saved from these players. You've got to imagine that John Lundstrom, Borna Barisic, Ryan Jack, Kemar Roof would have been on substantial wages, as would Fabio Silva, even though we were paying less than half of what he earned. Wolves, his parent club, were paying the majority of his wage. So you've got to look at that, probably the 8 million, at least, 3/4 of that's probably come from players' wage savings. So look, that's where we're at this moment in time. We have not generated any money from players outgoing yet. Now, I know there's a big long list of players that fans would like in ideal world to see depart this club. Scott Wright, James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, Ben Davis, Kieran Dowell, Tom Lawrence. Those are the sort of serial debtors. They're the sorts of players that, that fans want to see depart. Now, the big issue we have at this moment in time when it comes to talking about the likes of Scott Wright, James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, for example, is that a lot of fans see these players as not good enough, as not up to the standard they once were, not up to the talent they used to be. Now, look, Tav and Goldson, the two that caused the biggest amount of divisiveness within the fan base, the two that cause me the most headaches, the two that when I give an opinion, which it seems that some fans don't like, they absolutely abuse me beyond ridiculousness. Players who, Tav and Goldson, great servants to the club, two guys that have contributed a phenomenal amount to Rangers, and obviously we thank them for that. Of course we do. But, two players that, as we've seen since sort of February, March time last year, have really suffered a massive drop-off in form because they're getting older. Connor Goldson's 31, Tavernier is 32. Scott Wright, another player, again, who isn't Rangers quality. Cyril Dessers, again, not Rangers quality. Not the talent that we need, and certainly not a player that fits in with Nils Koppen's idealisticness of what we're looking for as a club. Now, the issue we've got is, if we don't think they're good enough, if we don't think they're up to actually playing first team football, what makes you think that another club's going to think that? What makes you think that another club's going to come in and pay a large amount of money for any of those players? That is the issue we've got. Now, we can talk all we want about getting rid of Tav, getting rid of Goldson, getting rid of Wright and Dessers and X and Y and Z. But if nobody wants to buy them, we're stuck. We're stuck with them on contracts. Now, the big problem we've got is a lot of these players are on substantial wages at this club. That the contracts that negotiated under Stuart Robertson and Ross Wilson, who are just ridiculous, the pair of them, absolute wastes of space. When you're giving Connor Goldson, who we signed at a time when there was no competition for him, nearly £40,000 a week. James Tavernier, £30,000 a week. Cyril Dessers, £27,000 a week. He's probably worth about £27 a week, but £27,000 a week. Ben Davis, I think he's on about £24,000 a week. Why are these players going to move to clubs where they're going to get paid less than half of that unless they go to Saudi Arabia? So, this is the situation we're faced with. There was the talk of Goldson going to Birmingham, but he wouldn't get anywhere near what he was getting at Rangers. Tav going, to play down, playing in Turkey. Again, not paid anywhere near £30,000 a week. So why are they going to move on when they're not going to get paid the same wages? You know yourself that if you're in a job and your job pays you 35 grand a year, if a job comes down the road comes in and offers you 25 grand a year, you'd be daft to take it. You'd be daft to take a 10 grand pay cut. And I think the same applies to these footballers. So that's the difficult situation we're presently in. Until we actually get clubs coming in and bidding for these players, we are in a really tricky situation in terms of getting them out. Now, the issue, of course, is that we need to bring in players, but the problem is the squad is massively bloated. The wage bill is very, very high indeed. That is a massive issue at this moment in time. If you look at our squad as it stands at the moment, there are 30 players in the squad. So again, it's already bloated. The average age has come down to 24.9, but that's obviously with a lot of these young players that have come in over the summer so far being 19, 20 years old. There are 73% of the squad are foreign. So obviously, the fact that we need a number of homegrown players for the European quotas is something we need to take into account. There's 22 out of those 30 players are foreign-based players. The other thing as well is we have only 8 internationals amongst those 30. So again, the quality perhaps isn't there. But the issue, of course, is that whilst the squad value currently sits at 84.25 million and the squad size sits at 30, the wage bill sits at the highest in Scotland. We have a situation where bringing in players at this stage is exceptionally tough until we clear out what we've got. That is the issue that we currently face. You look at, like I said, Connor Goldson is under contract until 2026. You've talked about Ben Davis till 2026. He is under contract. James Tavernier is under contract till 2026. You look also at the likes, obviously, of Kieran Dowell is under contract till 2026. Yanis Hadji is under contract till 2026. Rabbi Matondo till 2026. Tom Lawrence is out of contract next year, so that is one that does desperately need to be addressed. Scott Wright is out of contract next year, so again, that is another one that does need to be addressed. Sam Lammers, who we're trying to move on, but we're obviously struggling at the moment to do so because no one wants to pay the asking price. He's under contract till 2027, is on substantial wages. Cyril Dessers under contract till 2027 and on substantial wages. So this is, of course, the big issues. Now, this is where we're at. This is where we are at as a club. Until we clear some of this dead wood out, we are in a position where we're going to have to try and make the best of what we've got until we create some squad space. That is the big issue. Now, at the moment, the players we've brought in, you may say, well, that's not overly impressive, is it really? Mohamed Diamande, I don't really count him as an arrival this summer because he was already signed on loan in the January window. Yes, I know we've paid the rest of the fee, which is about £4.5 million. It says €5 million there. So again, it's €500,000 off that to get the price in English money. Hamza Igman obviously was signed. Jeff Hefte was signed. So, we've spent about £2 million on Igman, about 650,000 on Jan Hefte. Barron was a free transfer. Liam Kelly was a free transfer, and Clinton Nsiala was a free transfer. So you can see from that, Oscar Cortez also as well could be on that list. That's missing off. He's missing off the list again. He was around. He's on loan. We probably had about half of his initial fee to pay at 2 million. So look, we've not spent a massive amount of money. We've probably spent, like I said, 3/4 of what we saved in wages, and that's where we're at. And if you look at the number of players we've brought in, which at current stands at 7, if you include Diamande, we had 5 go out. So it kind of got a squad balance. You've also had Kieran Wright go out on loan as well. Robbie McCrory has now left as well. He's in the process of going to Kilmarnock for around $500,000. So again, we've generated some money there. So we're kind of breaking even on that 8 million expenditure. And reducing the squad number. So basically 7 out, 7 in. So like I said, it seems to me that there seems to be a balancing that needs to go on here before we can move on, before we can kind of, get this squad moving forward. And I know that amongst the fan base, there is a very strong desire to bring in a lot of new players. And there is a lot of areas I know need to be addressed, arguably right back, centre back, attacking midfielder, another winger, a striker. These are all areas that do need to be addressed. But the issue we're facing is, I think, that until we clear some squad space and we clear some salary space, there literally is no room for any more players at this present moment in time. And Clement has kind of got to get on with what he's got. And as much as he may have liked having, some more fresh players, some more experienced players in place for the pre-season trip to Holland, Rangers are at the bottom of a very steep cliff, and we're having to scramble up that cliff as we speak. And we won't reach that. That peak of that cliff until we've kind of shed off some of the weight, some of the dead weight that's holding us back. And that's where we're at this moment in time. Now, looking at Saturday's game, and probably if the season started on Saturday, I know it's a stupid thing to say. Well, like I said to you, what I'm trying to explain is this is where we are. This is where we need to go. So, this is probably what the starting lineup would look like on Saturday if Clement goes with what he would perceive to be his strongest 11 if the season started on Saturday. You cast your eyes over that. So Butland in goal is a given. Tav, Goldson, Suter, Ridvan, which is the same back four as we had last season, which pretty much is a lot of hassle. Is trouble for us. James Tavernier defensively has got weaker, has got worse. If you look, I know he contributes a lot of goals going forward, but if you look at teams around Europe and in Scotland, they target the right-hand side of our defence. They get in down the right-hand side. Dyson Maida, for example, being a prime candidate. Connor Goldson would probably start. Again, that right side of the defence needs to be ripped out, thrown, sent somewhere else, and we need a new centre-back, new right-back. Suter, I think is a good player, but is he necessarily a starting player? Do we need someone to come in his place? Do we need 2 centre-backs? I think the thing is we're going to have to try and cut our coat according to our cloth in this window. And I think realistically, we're probably only able to afford 1 centre-back. Yes, and Nsiala may long-term take that, or as the season goes on, take over that role. But I think you're going to see a situation where whoever we buy, if, and that's a big if, we buy another centre-back, will play alongside Suter, Davis, Balogun, whoever's at the club, and Nsiala, hopefully. Ridvan, I think, Friday he stays fit, he's a given. He has to start. Diamande and Barron looked quite healthy there. You've got other options to bring in there, of course, as well. Nicholas Raskin, I think, is another option. He looked very good towards the end of last season. Sterling, I think, would start on the right wing. One, to protect Tav defensively. That's something that Sterling is in there for. He tracks back, obviously, a lot better than Ross McCausland, given the fact he is more a right back than a right winger. I think that's where he would use. That's where Clement would use him to afford extra protection to Tavernier. Now, for me, that's tactically ridiculous because you shouldn't just play a player because you're trying to protect someone else because they're not good enough defensively. Realistically, we need someone like a Seamer there, like Danny Armstrong. Someone out there who has got that threat going forward. We need to stop worrying about other teams and take the game to teams. Now, Sterling is a very good player, don't get me wrong. He's a very talented player. He's one of the best players we have. But realistically, central defence or right back, central midfield or right back are his 2 best positions. Cantwell would probably start in the 10 role if the season started today. I don't think Hadji will stick around. Tom Lawrence, I don't think is up to the task anymore. Looks an okay player, but Cantwell's probably better. But is he the finished article? Is he consistent enough? That's the big worry for me. Cortez would start on the left, outstanding, very talented player, has to start. Up front, it's going to be a rotation at the moment between Dessers and Danilo. Danilo isn't fit yet, isn't up to speed, hasn't played competitive football for a very long time, which means Cyril Dessers is going to be played, which therefore means you're facing the same problems as we had last season, where he's going to miss key chances in big games that are going to cost us. 4 against Hearts, 2 against Ross County, 1 against Celtic, 1 against Benfica, 1 against PSV. I could keep going. There's 28 big chances in all. I know that'll upset his fans out there, the ones that think he's God's gift, but realistically, he's, yes, he scored 22, 23 league goals. You should at Rangers, the amount of chances you get, echoing what Chris Boyd said. So, that's how the squad would look. And for me, that's not good enough at this moment in time. Now, look, I know it's going to come back, talking about, I don't want to talk about Celtic. I don't want to talk about the type of team they are. I don't want to talk about their players. But what I want to talk about is Rangers. I want to talk about a Rangers team strong enough to compete, a Rangers team that has developed and moved on from last season. And that, for me, that 11 has not developed and has not moved on from that last season. It's the same back four. It's the same main striker, probably, in Cyril Dessers, who failed. It's the same kind of midfield, again, that didn't, apart from, I'm not including Barron and Diamande in this, both class acts. Barron, I suppose we don't know yet how he's going to settle in. As a team, we need to add to that, and that's going to take time because of where we're at as a club. Now, where do we need to get to? We need to get to a position where we've got, a new right back, a new centre back, another striker, another attacking midfielder, and another winger. That is a lot of players. Now, Stevie Clifford spoke about about a dozen deals. He thought about another 6 deals. That would be pretty much about right. Centre back, right back, attacking midfielder, winger, striker. That's 5 more deals. That would take us to 12 if you include Diamande. That is where we need to be, I think, by the end of this window. And it will take time because we'll have to clear players. We'll have to sell players. We'll have to clear contracts. That's just where we're up to. And that's where we're at as a club. Now, we may be frustrated by this. And I get that. And I 100% feel your frustrations. I'm frustrated too. But we've got to kind of realize that we are where we are. And that to move forward now, we need to start to clear. We need to start to move out players. And until clubs start coming in for these players, we're stuck with them. Because, if we don't want them, what makes you think someone else is going to want them? And the problem is a lot of them are on big wages. And that's where we're at as a club. And that is the worrying situation. Now, whilst I 100% think Koppen's vision, his plan, his schemes for moving us forward are excellent, are outstanding. And I think if he can put them into fruition, if he is properly backed by this board, and therein lies a huge problem, being properly backed by a board who couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, this is the issue. This is the strong issue we've got. Right, guys, look, that's where we're at. Let me know what you think. I personally think that this squad is not yet good enough to compete to get into the Champions League. That's one thing. If we don't get into the Champions League, we can't get that transformative money. The transformative money will help this club move forward. Will help us get those players in. That's where we're at. And that's where we need to be. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments, obviously. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. Bit of a longer video. Do apologise, guys. Just want to kind of get off my chest a few things I've been thinking about, where we're at, where we need to move to, what the situation is. Try and get a bit of frustration out, get a bit of realism to the situation, and talk a little bit, I don't know, with a bit of a sensible head over some of the issues. Let me know what you think anyway. You might hate it. I don't know. Let me know what you think. As always, guys, on the way out, 2 things you can do for me. Number 1, smash the like. Number 2, remember always, we are the people.